Love the count.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Association Analytics in Action series. We're going to give it just a minute for everyone to get logged in. We usually ask a fun question. So our fun question today is in the chat, besides letting us know where you're calling in from. For the married folks out there, let us know how long you dated your partner before you got married. And if you're not married, you can just let us know how long you've been dating. I was about, I want to say 4 years before my husband and I got married. 4 years? 8 months.
It'll be interesting to see the answers here.
What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I said 3.5. So we had a 1 year in there, 1.5.
There's the 8 months in there. 12.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to say that like shockingly. To each their own. Seems like average, yeah, year to 3-4 years.
Married for 28 years. Congrats.
I don't know.
40 years. Holy smokes. Okay, so whoever just said 40, Elizabeth, how long did you date before you got married and had a 40-year marriage going strong? Okay, so this one, it's not just big divorces in here. Sorry to hear that, guys.
We lived together for 3, Elizabeth. So
There you go.
4 years. All right, very interesting. All right, I think we've got a good group on now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Katrina McAfee. I'm the Director of Growth Marketing here at Association Analytics. This is our Analytics in Action series. So today we have our hosts, Greg Pollock and Bill Conforti. Bill is our SVP of Strategy and Solutions. He's been doing this for a long time. He helps our sales development and product teams improve our product and services for our customers. And then Greg Pollock is our SVP of Sales Enablement. He's been in the industry working with and for associations for over 15 years. Today, he helps lead our sales team at A2 and participates in tons of speaking events. So does Bill. I'm sure you guys, obviously, besides this webinar, have seen them at lots of industry events over the years. So you're in good hands with that. And then we have an extra special guest today, Chris Glody, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Chief Consultant at Ricochet. It's my company we're focused on helping associations transform the way they do membership and marketing. And that includes everything from strategy through campaign work and even the technologies that support it all.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so look, this is going to be a special one, and we got lots of stuff to cover, so we're going to fly through it pretty fast. But nevertheless, wanted to encourage everybody to jump in with their questions and comments. Thank you so much for telling us about your dating history and your marriages. So the reason we asked that is Chris is a dating and relationship expert, as well as being an expert on growing your membership, right? And how the old ways of doing it are kind of in the past, and he's got a fresh take on how we should do this, nurture those relationships. And of course, Greg and I are going to pop in with some questions here and there, and we'll tie it up a little bit by telling you about how analytics applies to all of that. So this should be a fun one. Greg, what do we have on tap?
Thanks, Bill. So I'm super excited to have another guest host with us today. If you've noticed our webinars recently, we've had a lot of guests join us to help augment what we're talking about. A little bit of, you don't have to take my word for it. So what are we covering today? Today, we're going to ask you some questions. We've got some pretty good interactive polls and some questions we're going to ask. We're going to talk all about what growth looks like. Growth has definitely changed recently. Modern strategies for attracting and gaining new members, and how technology plays a huge piece in that. 2 slides next, Chris. We'll skip this one. We just did that. And then who are we? So we're Association Analytics. Obviously, we think data and analytics play a huge role in membership and in marketing and in understanding what's working. And today we're really talking about how to better attract members through your marketing funnel. But who are we at Association Analytics? We have a product called Acumen AI. Out of the box, it has pre-built integrations and artificial intelligence tools that help you make the most of your data. And we're going to make the most of our time today. I'm going to tag Chris in and let him take it away.
All right, everybody, I know you're here to hear about my dating history. I'm going to make it really brief. Total disaster for 30 years, but I am much better at membership than I am in dating. And today we're going to talk about how some of those rules of dating do apply to membership. The first you need to understand is a little bit about how membership has evolved and why the things just actually the same in the way that dating rules are not the same as they were 30 or 50 years ago. Membership rules are not the same. When we look at a photo like this, you can instantly understand this is a meeting of Rotarians, like a membership-driven organization. They are there for their lunch meeting on the third Wednesday of the month in the basement of City Hall, where they all get together. And membership worked in that way for our organizations for so many decades. And that old model, that old way of members getting together and networking defined the way that we think about growth and how we measure growth and how we approach growth in 2023, and that's wrong. In fact, we don't even talk. Literally, we don't talk about membership today. So that picture you saw, that was roughly 1950, and I found this chart online with a really neat tool called Google Books Ngram Viewer. It scans literature to find the occurrence of words in essentially all of the books that were published. And you can see that we were talking about membership in increasing ways all the way until the 50s, and then suddenly the trend reversed. And we don't even talk about membership, but we still use these old membership growth, these old membership recruitment, these old membership retention models and expectations. Today's professionals are not the people that you saw in that photo 2 slides ago. Today's professionals don't meet on the third Wednesday of every month in the basement of City Hall to get together and talk to each other. And they're not, because they're not ready to give that level of commitment, actually. They need a connection, often digitally, before they start to engage with you with more substantial contributions of their time or their money. And so the trick is you can't just send somebody an invitation to join your organization and expect them to pony up the cash and the time in 2023, whereas you could do that in 1950. The membership campaigns that so many of us are executing today are from that 1950s playbook. We're sending out an email blast and saying, hey, here are the benefits of joining our association. Won't you join us? It'd be great. Click here to join. I was a membership officer for a large association, and I sent out lots of emails just like that for a long time until I kind of started to understand that people didn't reply, and I wouldn't reply to that type of email. If somebody sent me something out of the blue and said it's time for you to join for $4.99 a year and you get access to this, this, and that, I would have deleted it immediately myself. You have to build a connection. You have to start nurturing those relationships with your non-members. So we often talk about engagement with members. So we have 150 people in the room right now, and most of you are membership professionals, and I bet most of you have had numerous conversations about how you're engaging with members. But a conversation we never have is how do we engage with non-members? And when we call that engagement with non-members, we really call this lead nurturing. So if you've worked with me in the past, you know I love quizzes, and we're going to have our first quiz today, and we've got more than one. But we're also very excited because we're going to be showing some new quiz technology. And here it is. I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone and scan the barcode in the top left of the screen. And after you finish answering this quiz, you don't need to close the app because we're going to have a few more questions. And Greg and Bill, you can play along here. So why don't you scan that and then choose an answer. My question is, what is your best source of member leads? All right, we've got some answers on the board. And that's the great thing about this new quiz technology is we can see it coming in. Now I'm asking you to just choose one of the answers here. I want to know number one source for your member leads.
Hey, Chris, we like to break the fourth wall here. One great way we get leads at Association Analytics is thought leadership and content webinars like this. Imagine that.
Yeah. Oh, and webinar attendees was number 2 on the list, but it just got bumped down to number 3. So very common for so many of us. I work with lots of associations that rely on webinars year round to drive leads. Bill?
I'd love to hear from anyone who answered other. What are some of the other things you're doing to drive member leads?
We're going to maybe put that in the chat. So yeah, member meeting attendees it could be regional events or local meetups, but I'm guessing lots of people are using their annual conference as a way to generate member leads. So you have a lot of leads, right? You got them in your toolkit, you got them on your list. And if you read about B2B relationship marketing, lots of times you're going to see an image like this. You're going to see 2 people shaking hands in a suit, and it's really formal. And this imagery has created this mental model in our head that there's this really kind of super formal email sequence that we might send somebody trying to convince them to join our association. Today, I want to convince you need to strike this image from your head because it's sending you down the wrong path. The image I would like you to replace it with in your head is an image like this. I want you to start thinking about relationship marketing, where we nurture our leads, to be more like dating. And so and it's literally in the name, but we are just so maybe out of touch with what it originally meant that we don't think about it this way, but it's relationship marketing. We are trying to create a relationship. And if you think about it more like dating than a professional handshake environment, you're going to do a lot better and have a lot more success.
Hey, Chris, one quick comment. I wonder if you can go back a slide for me 1 second. You know, if we think about dating in the 40s and 50s, it was dinner and a movie, right? Let's go out into the theater and have some formal. Now it's like, hey, let's get coffee over lunch, right? We've changed the formality of that. And I think that's going to carry over here in our messaging in a few seconds here. It's a lot less formal. It's a lot less structured, right?
Yeah, no chaperones anymore. That's for sure. At least not on any of the dates that I've been to. Again, don't take my dating advice. We're going to talk about how you can build a nurtured relationship that ultimately leads in membership. They are at the right-hand side of the screen, but you need to go through some steps. So, and as we're thinking about this, as each of these steps, we're going to be talking about an increased level of commitment. We're going to start off with kind of that first date where we don't really know each other, where we're anonymous. And then we're going to move into something where we at least know each other's names and a little bit about each other. And then maybe we're making some investments in the third step, where we are starting to put literally a little bit of cash into the partnership, into the relationship. Our dates become friendlier and more meaningful. And it's more than just maybe movies. Now we're doing fancy dinners or even vacations together before we get to that final step. So this is the beginning of the model. You guys can kind of see how we go step by step by step. Now, in the traditional membership acquisition mindset, we would jump from step 1 all the way to asking them to join our association. Like I said, these are the emails that I've sent out in the past, but not with great success. There has to be a new way to do it. I will tell you, so does anybody in the chat know who this is? Does anybody know this guy's real name? I'm going to let Greg and Bill see if anybody knows this guy's real name.
We've got it already. Danny Bonaducci.
It is, in fact, Danny Bonaducci from the Partridge Family. Does anybody know the name of his character on the show? This is kind of an easy question.
I don't know that.
I think it was Danny, wasn't it?
It was Danny. It was Danny Partridge on the show. That way they made sure he always answered when they said his name in the script. So Danny Bonaducci did something that I'm telling you you should never do. So Danny Bonaducci met a woman on a date, and he got married that night. So Danny Bonaducci went from step 1, get to know you, to step 4, let's join together permanently. And how long do you think that Danny and his marriage lasted? Yes or no? You think that worked out?
Somebody said not long. No, nah.
Yeah. There you go. So it didn't
Nope.
last, but it lasted actually quite a while. So Danny surprised me, but it is very rare that you would even have success introducing yourself and then going straight for the membership offer. And with success, you have to nurture somebody. And even when you do have success bringing somebody in as a member right away, often they don't last as a member. So let's talk a little bit about how well you are nurturing your prospective members. Pull out your camera or your phone again. There you go, give me an answer. So you told me where your leads are coming from. Now I want you to think, are you trying to Danny Bonaducci those leads? Are you going straight for the membership offer, or are you helping to build a relationship over time? And so I would say if you're doing great, you're building that relationship over time, you are nurturing it. If you're doing so very bad, that's the last option there. If you're doing so very bad, that means you're going straight for the kill. You're going straight for that membership ask. All right.
I wonder if when we go straight for the ask, we have some retention problems, right? People might have joined for the wrong reasons. They might not have understood the value of membership when they joined. Maybe they joined for that discount. And that's probably a similar thing with our relationships here.
You 100%. Like often I've done free trial offers, so we get we get people joining, but then they don't retain. Same story for Danny Bonaducci. So he went straight for the end goal. He got married, and that didn't last. It fell apart. So
there's an interesting thing that we see quite often is that retention jumps after the first or maybe the second renewal, and there's a real push, a real urgency to show value to all members during that first year of members. Like we have to get everyone to come to the event in the first year, otherwise they're probably not going to renew. And it seems to me, I never thought of it this way, but that could be because there wasn't enough nurturing, right? So they didn't get a sense for the value prior to joining. So now we have to cram all of this, what would otherwise be long-term nurturing into that first year, right? Otherwise, and then we lose them maybe for good, right?
Yeah, you got it. So I actually think there's probably two parts. Often in the nurturing phases, we are making promises. Again, it's just like a real relationship, right? But then after you join, after you literally get married, or after you've joined the organization as a member, we have to fulfill on those promises. And it's not up to our members to figure out how to take advantage of the benefits. We have to show them the way. Many of us have confusing associations. It's not really straightforward sometimes on how to join a committee, how to get that discount, how to find these resources. So I do believe in both nurturing and onboarding and engagement. All right. So if we are changing the way that we approach membership acquisition, bringing members in, we also need to change the way that we think about our metrics. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about how there are new metrics at each of those phases, at each of those commitment steps that are more than what I've traditionally been reviewed on myself and what most membership directors are reviewed on, which is membership count and dues revenue. Most of us have a number that are leading membership, and those that we are responsible for, it's often membership count. And then kind of in the same breath, your boss is going to say dues revenue. I'm going to tell you today, there are some other metrics you need to be watching that kind of help you understand how well you're nurturing and ultimately will be driving good membership count and dues revenue. So let's talk about this modern strategy, how we're going to take somebody through this series of commitment steps so that they're comfortable joining and want to join our organization. We're going to start with that first step. And I talk about this as the content step. We want to freely share some of our valuable proprietary branded content online to engage prospects. Often we are sharing content that's SEO friendly because we're trying to get anonymous people online to come and view our content. As a membership, fanatic, I often talk about the need to lock down our content because that's a member benefit. But I am advising you for acquisition efforts to just open the gate a little bit and release some of your good content. Maybe in the chat, people might talk a little bit about some of the content that they've released into the wild to attract anonymous visitors to their site.
Chris, question about this. Do you think if I have this content, am I consciously creating content designed for non-members? Or am I just taking some member stuff off the shelf and putting it on the other side of the paywall? Or is it like a combination of both?
So I think that I love that question because I can give you the theoretical, philosophical right answer, but I'm going to tell you, I know that we have a lot of people in the room that aren't fortunate enough to have a 20-person membership team that can crank out unique content for all of their needs. And so the practical side of me says, realistically, what I do is I go and look at the content that I have available and say, oh, okay, what can I kind of repurpose for this need? So many of us are challenged with limited resources and time. And so I think more often than not, we are repurposing something.
And then I think this goes back to the previous slide where we're talking about sort of this continuum of getting to know our friends. And I imagine that there's an exchange here. I'm going to give you valuable content, but in return, I need to get something back. And it's probably not monetary at this point. It's probably identification, right? Chris, if you want a guide, there's like a HubSpot page you've got to get through to get access to it, right?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Right now, like, Greg, don't rush the relationship. Right now, we just sat down for coffee and you're already asking for my phone number. So I'm telling you, just take a moment, show me your smile, start to charm me a little bit. We're going to give up a little bit of the content. Now, so we've got challenges like Greg, you and I both, we got to make sure we smile a lot. We got to make sure that we are actually engaging. Our mind doesn't start to wander. We don't pull out the phone. And if you're a content marketer at a membership organization, you got to make sure that's good quality content. You don't want to release it all. We need to make sure it's SEO friendly. So you're putting that content out there in a way that attracts people. You got to make sure if you're on a dating app, you put your best photo on that lead profile pic. We are bringing in anonymous visitors, Greg. So they're not, we don't know who they are, but we want to do something. We got to get to know them better. Our challenge is, how are we going to entice them to convert to community? At this point in the process, we're just looking at unique visitors to our web page, unique page views, and search referrals. And I think these are metrics that are common to web managers, but in membership, we don't tend to look at this type of stuff. I am starting in my own consulting practice and with the clients that I work with, we're starting to look at these metrics as the beginning of our lead funnel. So we're asking the questions, how are we bringing more anonymous visitors to our page? Because we need to get more first dates before we can get kind of seal the deal with the marriage proposal.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have some ways that you look at this type of data.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were describing that, I think it's quite common, and maybe this is something we should all look at. Like, there's a lot of tools that where you index your content, or you find the piece of content, or like there's the abstract, but if you want to read the whole content, the first thing it does is ask you for your email address. It's quite, it's pretty common, but I'm kind of with you that maybe if there is a way to extend that out a little bit, show a little bit more value before you try to make that leap, I think in the long run the results might be better. So one of the things I just wanted to bring up, I mean, Chris brought up some really good metrics, right? Unique visitors, of course, page views. These are kind of giving you a sense for, in the aggregate, how's your site performing? Are those social ads, that you put out there? Are those email campaigns? Are there that thought leadership stuff that you're putting out on your website? Is that drawing people to your site? Are your referral sites, pushing people there? But then you can also, with GA4, that's Google Analytics 4, there's a lot of pretty easy things that you can set up as events, and you can monitor conversions on those things. Things like, do people watch your video, right? Never mind that you didn't ask them for their email address to watch the video, but do people watch the video? Do they start the video? Do they make it halfway through? Do some of them watch the entire video? Do they click the button? Do they scroll all the way down the page where you spent the time to write all of that good content? Are people actually reading that? So there's tons of things you can do. A lot of it is kind of out of the box with Google Analytics. You just have to set up those events and turn on the conversions. Anything to add to that, Greg?
I want to highlight some of our chat. Mary here said that they take their webinar content and turn it into articles and blogs and share that to get more interest. And I can imagine a blog coming out of this webinar, actually. So that's a really interesting one. And someone else said here, our blogs are free. You can go read them, but if you want to subscribe, that's where the exchange happens, where we ask you for your email address.
Okay. Great. So people are absolutely thinking about this the way that they should be. How do we put some free content out there before we start asking you for your contact information? So somebody's already answered this in the chat. Maybe you guys can help me out by giving your answers here in the survey. So I heard somebody say, we always make that anonymous free content available for our blog, on our blogs. podcasts are really hard to lock down. So for those of us that have podcasts, I think those tend to be freely available. I know that there's some folks experimenting with some paid versions of podcasts. Yeah, publications. So very common to have blogs and web articles. And I'm glad to see so many people answered this, because you can also watch the publication websites, whether that's the big news organizations, to see how they're experimenting with this. So Bill, you said sometimes they let you see the top and then you have to register to see the rest. Sometimes they let you see 5 articles or 3 articles. They track you over time, and before you have to register to see the rest. Sometimes it's just always available. And one of my favorite tricks, well, we're going to get to one of my favorite tricks here in a moment, because this is a challenge, right? As we move from each step to the next, we have a special challenge to get through to nurture our content and nurture our lead and bring them along. And registration is the big challenge as we move to the next step. So we need to have some of that branded discussion in some way to deepen that relationship. And that branded discussion needs to be connected one-to-one. So we need to get people into a webinar where they've registered. We need to have quality conversations, and we do need them to come back. Here, Greg, is where we are adding the name to our database. So often, lots of you told us that you're using conferences for your lead, like your #1 lead source. So you undoubtedly have people registering. You kind of skipped over some step 1 and went straight to step 2. You're getting that registration data. But you should also be looking at not only how many people registered, like registered for a webinar today, but actually how many people came and how many people are engaging in the chat and in the questions. And then what is the attendance count? So you've got some metrics here. I'm going to say what my favorite little tool is that I'm experimenting with now. I don't have a fancy web infrastructure at many of my clients, on many of my clients' websites. So what I'm starting to use is pop-ups, so that when people are browsing the content, if they're not logged in as a member, we do a pop-up that says, hey, would you like to register and subscribe to our monthly newsletter? So this is a new thing that we're starting to do more and more, to try and take all those anonymous web visitors and get them into our database. And we get an okay return on that.
I was going to ask, what's the conversion on a pop-up? If you pop up, is there an average ratio of fill-outs?
We play a lot with like the format of these pop-ups and how we describe those newsletters. And so it ranges quite a bit depending on the industry and what we are able to say the newsletter includes.
So could you determine, like, well, wait 30 seconds after Greg hits the website, or 5 scrolls? Is that what you're playing with there?
Yes, and you can even set it up so that if somebody's making a beeline with their cursor for the exit button to close out the browser, that it pops up. And one of my favorite tools is a plugin called Opt-in Monster that works really nicely with WordPress, pretty common with association sites. Opt-in Monster, terrible name, great tool.
All right. Yeah, I was interested in how many people mentioned publications as something that they offer up for free, because they're kind of it's usually it's a member benefit, but also they're pretty labor intensive usually to put together. So if you are doing that and providing that for free, then good on you. I think that is a very valuable thing to offer up to the community. So a lot of times when you hear us talking about community, we're talking about like Higher Logic or something like that. We're talking about your virtual community. Here we're talking more about your constituency, right? The ecosystem of all of your members, and all of the different groups of non-members that make contact with you. So just on the screen here, just some of the things that you're already doing that can give you a sense for whether you are doing a good job of growing your community. It's things like non-event member attendance. In particular, first year non-member attendance is something that you can grab pretty easily. You want to look at those that are taking courses that are non-members, in particular those that have first-time learners, and then as well as those that have taken multiple courses, things like that. So think about all of the other touch points that you have with customers aside from membership, and those are really all the ways that you can get a sense for how you're doing with growing your community.
Well, Bill, Mark in the chat here also talked about community might be social media. right? So I might be creating content and consciously posting on social media as an outpost to bring people in. And Chris, that's okay if it's anonymous and I don't know who they are, right? Because we're just getting to know each other.
Yeah, so I'm like I'm torn, right? So I feel like we're achieving our strategic goal in that scenario where we're building the relationship. That's what we're trying to do. If it's in social, we're not getting the registration information in my CRM, in my AMS. And so that could limit us down the road. If you're building your social, I think you might want to have a little like splinter effort to, from time to time, encourage those people that are following you in the social networks to sign up for your newsletter or sign up for this seminar or something else to that effect.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So tell me what communities, and we have a very broad definition of community here, just like Bill said, are you using to make available to your prospects? So not just member only, but which of these do you make available to prospects? I'm curious to see if anybody's making like their discussion forum. Oh yeah, let's see, did it just, no, I think a couple of people maybe for discussion forums. Okay. So this is where you all need to kind of apply some art. There's not a whole lot of science behind this. You have to decide, where do we protect things as a member benefit versus what do we release to be a prospect engagement or nurturing tool? Discussion forums traditionally are a member benefit. So many of us have a higher logic discussion forum. So it's not surprising to me to see that at the bottom. It is interesting to me that you're offering in-person meetings for prospects. And I wonder if some of us are charging for that, which is amazing if you're able to take prospects and bring them in to pay for something more than your like annual conference. Facebook groups, got it. LinkedIn groups. So the groups are great. You have to figure out though your strategy for moving them from the group into your AMS or into your CRM. Newsletters, I'm starting to use more and more. So I even do offer now newsletters that say member only for some of the content in the newsletter. So I think it's a double whammy, right? I'm giving them the benefit. They're starting to understand our association, but I'm also reminding them in the newsletter, some of that you have to be a member to experience, like to get the deep article or the deep, sometimes we have discounts even that we offer in the newsletter.
Yeah. One quick comment just before we go off that is that all the membership people can like close your ears for just a second. Like sometimes like joining as member is not the ultimate goal, right? Is not the ultimate conversion that you can get. So we talk about in-person meetings, like a lot of organizations, the meeting is their number one revenue driver. It's not membership at all. And so you can basically substitute meeting attendance for membership and all of the same things apply, right? So you don't necessarily just ask somebody to attend your meeting out of the blue either. Establish some value, you nurture that. And maybe they'll also join as members, but in some cases, somebody that comes to your meeting year after year and engages in other ways, even if they never become a member, is a really valuable thing to have as well.
Yeah, Bill, so I'm a membership guy, so you just set my ears on fire. I do believe in the value of membership, also because so many of us need our members to help develop our content. So I see it as like the ultimate expression of loyalty. I also know so many studies that show the lifetime value of a member really can exceed what is somebody that is essentially an annual conference registrant. But you're absolutely right. There are lots of wins along the path.
Chris, I see a lot of non-member rates here for the conference in the chat. What are your thoughts on non-member rates at the conference?
Well, I think it's great because that means that you've managed to push people to the next level, which is commercial. So we kind of remember we started anonymous, like kind of no commitment from them. Then we asked for them to give us some information about them, like their name and their email address, so we can get them in the database. And still, before I asked them to do like that big membership transaction, I'd like to get them accustomed to taking some commercial, like doing some commercial relationships with us. So some low-cost, valuable products or meetings or conferences that create that transactional relationship. So this is like a precursor to asking them to put down their credit card for membership. The challenge for many of us is it's kind of easy to come up with a non-member conference rate.
Yeah.
But after that, the lake gets a little shallow. There's not a whole lot of opportunities to create other kind of smaller transactions. And conference rates can be pretty high, right? So we are all searching for kind of lower cost, lower commitment options that move them up this commitment process. And then you have pricing challenges. So often we don't want to price something lower than what a member would receive for it. And so all of this becomes an issue for us. In the end, we're looking for people that have done these types of commercial transactions. And as a membership person, I'm interested in seeing how much purchase volume and revenue I can drive. So here's some commercial stats. Acumen can show you all of this at a glance. This is the great thing about Acumen is you get all of these metrics kind of as you're going from step to step in the relationship process.
Yeah. So here, just in the chat. So what are your what are your common products and services that you offer to non-members? So let's, for purposes of this, let's leave the in-person meeting out, right? Because that's a big ticket item. They pay a lot for that. Do you have anything that's like something small, right? Just that's really cheap. I don't know. I think we see it for maybe courses. If you offer, continuing education, sometimes there's, there's a, $40, $50 course or webinar, something like that you can buy. But the two things on the screen are just, one is just overall sales volume, and you can drill in and see exactly what's selling and to whom and whether they're members or not, and what are their demographics and all of that. But on the right is an overlap analysis, because the whole purpose of selling that one small ticket item is you don't want them to just buy that. You want the relationship to continue. So you want them to buy other things. So the idea of understanding which products lead to purchases of other products and other activities is really key, because that keeps the relationship moving forward, right? That gets you to the next step in that nurturing. So encourage you to look at overlap and not just purchase volume.
So Bill, I was on with an Acumen customer earlier, and I was showing them their sales data in Acumen, and I said, do you know what your number one product is? And everybody knew what their number one product was. And I said, do you know what your number one product for non-members is? And they were like, no. Well, like their number one product was a book you buy when you're getting certified, because you're a member and you're on your way to being certified, but they didn't know what their number one non-member product was. So that was an interesting conversation. We then talked about events, and I showed them what percent of their attendees were members, and they disagreed with me. They said, that number's not right. And I said, well, let's start to look at events, because your annual conference is mostly members, but did you know that these events are chock full of non-members? And they said, no, we had no idea that that's where all of our non-members were collaborating. They were coming to these specific types of events. So it wasn't just who's buying what product. It was what category of product is really leading the non-member charge, or what type of event. And I see a lot of webinars here. It was webinars for them, right? Their annual conference is a member benefit, but all their webinars where all these non-members were attending, and their goal is to grow membership. And I was like, here's a juicy list of non-members who are participating. What are you doing to nurture them? I'll send them this webinar and he'll love it.
There you go.
So this could, I'm just going to throw this question out there. Sorry if I'm derailing things, Chris, but so I see a lot of people are coming into the chat, and they're kind of explaining that we have, we have our products for members. We have the same products that are basically available for non-members, and they're just more expensive, essentially, right? So, yep. I mean, just about every association does it that way to some degree or another. Is that part of what you would consider the old playbook?
I think that it's a fine business strategy, but it's part of nurture development. I believe you need to find some kind of micro transactions, so some small products that you can offer up at $10 or less. We've got a little bit of a challenge across so many of our association industries that webinars have become essentially free. So it's very rare, even with those that include continuing education credits, it's increasingly rare that we're able to secure payments for that. So I'm encouraging people to think outside of the box. And so there might be some PDF toolkit that is helpful for your industry, or checklists that are helpful for in your particular industry that would be free to members, included as a benefit, but that you could offer for $4.99 or $2.99. So you're trying to build up your database, build up some expectations that you have content that is of like demonstrable value. It has a dollar amount associated with it. It's setting up some groundwork before we go in for the membership join request. It's good. Every step has challenges, and that product selection is the challenge in this step.
I wonder if there's some perceived value connected to that price tag as well, whether we give it away for free or we charge for it. I think if you charge for it, people might value it more and think it's more exciting to be a part of it. We were looking at an organization's learning data, and if they give the course away for free, their attendance rate is terrible and their completion rate is terrible. But when you charge just a little bit for that course, their completion rate skyrockets. And we said, stop giving this away for free. People aren't valuing the content, and they're sort of not completing it because they don't tie any sort of, like, I'm just giving a little bit of dollars to get a whole lot. But that perception, I think, is the key there. It's not necessarily, I want your credit card, I want your $10. I want you to value spending money with me to get insights.
For sure, you need to do some trial. So my observation is often if it's a paid course of multiple sessions or even one, if people pay for it, they're much more likely to complete it. I'm with you there. But on the flip side, you also often don't get as many people registering.
Yeah.
So you go from 300, perhaps kind of quasi unqualified leads down to 40 qualified paid leads. If you flip the business model, there's a lot of, this is where you have to do the back and forth and the analysis. I am saying if you've gone through these initial steps, like we've kind of nurtured them with newsletters over time before we really go in for the request that they buy the toolkit or pay for this course, you're going to have a higher success rate. All right, so this is the tricky part. What commerce things do you offer to prospects? And you can do multiple answers on this one as well. So I know many of you are, so where are you charging them? Where are you charging non-members to take advantage of that particular product? So, I'm impressed to see even articles on the board. And I think, again, if you're saying other, I'd love to hear what it is. Webinars, I'm impressed to see that. In-person events, so many of us do offer conferences. I'm impressed if you're bringing in the dollars with the webinars. Go ahead, Bill.
I would say I admit I skewed the results. I clicked our articles by accident.
I think you can unclick it on the app there. You can check.
Okay.
I think Mark makes a good point here. It's like, does it cost me money to put it on? Like if I invite you to my in-person event, I got to pay for lunch and the event physical location. A webinar, I don't have to pay for you to attend, right?
Right.
Yes, and I also warn people I work with to be careful about thinking about the price as a cost plus model. We should really be thinking about how much value does that deliver, and then back into how do we strip out some of the cost to hit our profit margins. Although I've also put on conferences and I've said the exact same thing. I got to cover their food. I've got to cover the speaker fees. We've got to, this is kind of how we get to the right dollar amount. All right, great. So in-person events, number one. Webinars, thumbs up for those of you that are able to charge for continuing education and other specialty webinars. Great for you. Articles is a tough one to crack for sure, because it often requires also a good amount of infrastructure. All right, so if we have attracted them to our website with anonymous content, and we've engaged and convinced them that they should sign up for our newsletter or join our Facebook group or our LinkedIn group or otherwise join some version of our community by giving us their registration information, their contact information. And then we've brought them along and they've purchased a toolkit for us, or they've signed up and paid for a webinar or attended a conference or a meeting as a non-member. You have warmed up you've nurtured that lead, you've warmed them up. And so it is time to ask them for the ultimate expression of their loyalty, and that is membership in your organization. So here are membership professionals. In the end, this is so often our job to convert those prospects to a paid member that is enthused and informed and ready to join the organization. We have some challenges. One is, like, how often are we supposed to be asking before it's too many or before it's too bothersome? What is the value proposition that we're presenting to them? And Bill, at the beginning, you were talking a little bit about that onboarding process. How do we make sure that they're getting the most out of membership? This is where the old-fashioned counts come into play. So this final step is where it matters. The new member count and the new dues revenue dollar figures matter. those other metrics we've talked about today, those are kind of indicators that help us understand the health of our relationship building stream of nurture activities, our nurture campaign, and look at all of this that we have here that we can pull in Acumen.
Yeah. So I was curious. We talked about database growth earlier, and I'm curious if anyone is that something that you actually monitor and track, right? I mean, of course, you keep track of the number of members you have and the number of new members and all of that, but are you actively monitoring the size of your prospect pool, right? The top of the funnel type thing. So I think that's interesting. If anyone is doing that, I'd be curious to hear about it. So the kind of things that we're showing now, these are all member engagement things, right? So once we get them to join, then we're sort of, it's no longer like the prospect funnel. Now it's more like the commitment curve, right? So we've shown some value. They've already come in recognizing some value of the organization, and we're trying to then get them to do more activities that indicate more loyalty, right? So if we did a good job of getting members that were enthused to join, then and I have to say that based on engagement scoring and other things that we look at, a lot of the members are not enthused, right? I mean, they renew year after year, but they are not enthused. But if they join and you've right, maybe just their organization pays for the membership, right? So of course they join. Why wouldn't they? But if you've nurtured, right, you've shown value, provided them some free stuff so they know you have good content, even if the join itself is sort of a low barrier, they're going to be enthused and they're going to be engaged. So that's really the point here. I wanted to. It's always a good time to talk about engagement.
There are a set of members that don't need to engage. So there are members that just are a member of your association to show their dedication to the profession or to support your advocacy interests. And so I actually, when I led engagement campaigns, we had efforts to kind of suppress some people that we didn't want to stir the pot with, right? Mm-hmm. They had 10 years of renewal history with us. We didn't need to keep emailing them saying, join this webinar, join this seminar, and create a problem. So that was, I thought, some pretty advanced strategy. We're going to let this, don't poke the bear was kind of that segment. But generally for kind of younger members, they do expect a value exchange. They expect something pretty tangible for their dues membership. And so that's where we do watch for this engagement.
Chris, I had a light bulb moment on your previous slide, and it sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but the date we had at the coffee shop where we're getting to know each other, I asked you what kind of movies you liked. And then when I made the request that we have the formal date, I said we should go to a rom-com because that's what you told me you liked. I didn't say we should go see this action movie because that's not what you like. Like, it just makes so much sense when you say it out loud. That's what you would do in real life. But do we do that in a marketing sense? Like, are we using the footprints they're leaving behind in our coffee shop meeting to make that request, or are we just hitting them with the generic join email with our 7 bullet points and hoping one of them sticks?
So we've all been in 100 webinars where the marketer told us we should be collecting all that information and using it to personalize back in the messaging. And I'll add to the list. I'll say the same thing 101 times now. You've heard it. I also understand realistically that we can't always execute against that because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the manpower, we don't have. we're trying to manage our hybrid annual conference at the same time we're trying to get the renewal invoices out. But you can sometimes do something in the middle. So maybe we understand what member type you might be. So if you at least are coming in as a prospective student member, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about student benefits than I would about professional benefits. So I see that there can be a much easier half measure.
I often think when we say segmentation, people sort of imagine there's 95 email templates and we're choosing 76A for you because of this thing you did. And I think segmentation is way simpler than that. It's like 4 segments sometimes, right? It's like, okay, these are our major buckets and I don't have to rewrite the email every time. I just have to pick the one that's closest.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's guilty, but commonly what I do is I write one email with 3 or 4 bullets in the middle of the email. And that's the only part that I change out. So I talk about 4 different bullets for a student than I would a professional member than I would for like a nonprofit member, this type of thing.
What a great tip. I heard once that the best way to send your next email is take your best email and change the subject line.
There you go. Yep. And Bill, you said you wondered how many people watch that member database growth. And for those of us that have email systems that charge per contact in the email system, we watch it really closely. But the challenge is we're always trying to get the number down, so we don't incur extra fees. So lots of times I work with my clients to get the number down, but we also have to remember our job is to grow it over time. So we're always trying to grow it with quality leads. So we get rid of all the people that put test as their first and last name. You know, we're on to you, those of you that tried to do this type of thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the roadmap. So if you're interested in doing some kind of nurtured development of your leads, there's some changes you need to make. You need to think about how you're going to fund this effort, how you're going to develop those skills and the technology. So this is not something that happens overnight. If you want, I already mentioned one tool. I said Opt-in Monster is a pop-up tool I'm using. That's not free. You got to pay for that. We've got to work with IT to figure out how we're going to add it to the website. We've got to talk to the team, because after we're collecting all of these email addresses, are we sure that we've got a way to add them to our newsletter data, our newsletter list? So all of this takes time. I see it as something that can evolve over a year, 2 years, or even 3 years as you're building out a new approach, as you're abandoning that 1950s Rotarian meeting and going to something where you're building a connection with your younger prospects digitally before you ask them to join. Now there's some tool, here's some of more of my favorite tools. So of course, Acumen is #1 on the list, but Acumen graciously said, well, we're going to show 4 slides about Acumen, so we won't make you put out that logo on this slide. To build out that anonymous content, I like to use Jasper, which is an AI content development tool. It's gotten so much better over the last couple of years. It writes the first draft for so many blog posts that my team and I do. I imagine many people on the webinar today are using Jasper. That Jasper needs a little guidance on what SEO terms it needs to throw in there. So we use SEMrush. I already told you about Opt-in Monster, which will do the pop-ups. My favorite little trick is if you start to move the cursor towards the little exit button, it'll pop it up and it'll say, hey, you want to subscribe to our newsletter before you go. It's amazing to me that it can do that. For those of you building out your community offering, so many of us are using Zoom webinar just like we are now, but you've already told me many of you use Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups. Higher Logic community popular in our association. And also that newsletter, so we talked about a newsletter, can be AI generated and enhanced. And I often work with Rasa to enhance that newsletter with AI content that can kind of beef up the value of our newsletter, especially for smaller associations that don't have a whole lot to put in every month. And then commercial stuff, you don't always want to, the commercial stuff doesn't always have to be tied into your AMS, which can get pretty complicated sometimes for somebody that doesn't want to go through the 14 steps to create an account before they check out. And so there's some end arounds where you might be working with your web team to implement just simple WooCommerce or Stripe checkouts, making it easy for people to make a quick kind of small transaction. And it looks like we might have a little, well, we're going to talk about maybe what's next and perhaps have a couple of minutes for some more chat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So coming up next, we have another, we have a partner or a customer, I should say, on this webinar. And it's not just for IMUS people, but it's about turning the stuff that you have already in IMUS into actionable insights. And we're going to be joined by our good friends from the American Counseling Association. So that one will be a lot of fun, especially if you are an IMUS user. So go ahead. We do have 5 minutes left to go ahead and jump in. How much is Jasper?
I feel, Bill, like that next session's perfect. So if you, like me, have had nothing but a string of disastrous relationships, you could go and talk to the folks from the American Counseling Association and maybe get some advice on like, what is it that you're doing wrong? How can I change to be more successful?
Family therapists are a customer as well, so we've got it covered.
We should do a whole string of relationship like themed webinars.
So Chris, I have a question. So we talked a lot about how to bring prospects into the fold and grow our membership, but at the end of the day, it's net gain in membership is really what we need to do. So how can we, or should we, apply these principles to retention, right? And to like keeping our members satisfied and nurturing that relationship as well.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge most associations face is they don't think about retention until it's time to send out the invoices at the end of the year. And that is probably when it's absolutely too late. There are many strategies. I think that the small kind of, if you're thinking about a crawl, walk, run approach, the thing that I like to do in the crawl phase is just figure out what the maybe 2 or 3 things are that most drive retention, and focus on those throughout the year. And at the American Bar Association, when I was the chief marketing officer there, we had a series of continuing education monthly webinars that were presented actually by like world famous lawyers. And I knew that was my #1 retention play. And so we put a lot of promotion behind just that one item. That was our crawl approach to member engagement.
Awesome.
I had
Okay.
a question for you, Chris, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So this all makes super sense when you say it out loud. Like, this is how you date. This is your relationship. This makes perfect sense to me. I work at an association and we've been doing membership recruitment the same way for the last 50 years. I don't want to rock the boat because what if I screw this up and it doesn't work? Like, how do I get started? Is there an easy entry point for me? Do I have to cannonball into the deep end here? Like, what do I do tomorrow to make this all start to happen?
Well, I think the best thing to do is bring in a consultant, because one of our jobs is to take it on the chin, and you can hang all the blame on the consultant if it doesn't work out. If you're not ready for a consultant though, you can also, I am doing a lot of this pop-up implementation just to start building the databases. If you're already giving away free blog content and you don't have a way to convert those visitors to your registered database, start thinking about how you might do a pop-up to get that email address.
Love it. And I think some of this requires budget. Any recommendation on how to have that budget conversation? Hey, I really want to bring in a consultant. We can do this better. What are you talking about? We're doing this great. Why would we need to spend money on this?
Yeah, so one nice thing is so many of us have a pretty hefty dues revenue, a dues membership fee. And so we can do, you can do some back of the envelope calculations that says, hey, look, if I bring in 25 new members, that's going to bring me, $15,000 in the first year, or $50,000 over the course of 3 years. Let's talk about how that's a positive return on a consulting investment. Or the technology, it doesn't have to be consultants, it could be technology or more.
All right. Awesome. Anybody
We got some good questions in chat here in the question answer. Sarah wants to know, what would you say is the average length of dating for a member before that we try and recruit them?
So I tried to do this in 90 days, and I can tell you that is not the right amount of time. So that wasn't enough warm-up time. I think that a good kind of time horizon could be 12 months or more. And every industry is different, and I highly recommend experimenting and tweaking and testing and seeing kind of what works in your particular industry.
Well, I guess I think I might change the metric. Instead of an average amount of time, maybe I want to look at something like an engagement score or a HubSpot score and say, like, what score is the right time to pounce? Does that sound like a better metric to use?
Yeah, you might. So again, Greg, I love that you live in this world with all of the membership team available to do all this extra analysis. So you got to kind of come up with like the back of the envelope, the easy estimates or the easy ways to do it. Many of us do use time, but if you're fortunate enough to have engagement scoring for your prospects, absolutely, that's an even better way to figure out when to do the ask.
We got another question here about, how do you balance chapter outreach with regular prospect outreach? Do I let my chapter leaders do the recruiting? They're on the ground and they're local, or is this national organization across the country do it for me?
Chapters are so complicated. I think that question could be an entirely additional session. So I'm not going to have good advice for you on chapters. It is, I am going to have a little bit of sympathy that it's a challenge to kind of find the right balance and the right coordination.
I'll second that one.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Chris, last one, then we got to go. What about job postings? Is that a good way to attract prospects?
That's a really clever suggestion. I think it absolutely could be in the right markets, in the right industry, at the right kind of economic time. So if that's, yeah, I think that's a really clever idea to throw into the mix, see how it
Good.
works.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, very well. Thank you for all the participation, great questions, participation in the polls. And thank you very much, Chris. It was a fun one, and hope we'll have you back again one of these days. Don't forget IMIS, turning IMIS data into actionable insights, coming up here in a few weeks. So look forward to seeing you all again in the next Analytics in Action webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Good to talk to you. Bye-bye.